Have you noticed how thinking feels harder lately? Not just distraction, disconnection. Like there's a wall between you and your own thoughts. You reach for an idea, and it's not there. You open your mouth and wait for something else to speak. Not from within, but from somewhere else. That ache behind your eyes, that weight in your chest when the page stays blank, that twitch in your hand reaching for a tool to help, that's not laziness. That's your mind being rewired. And here's the brutal truth. You're not using AI tools. They're using you. Every autocomplete, every suggestion, every quick solution is reinforcing something beneath the surface. You're not solving problems. You're outsourcing thinking itself. You're not speeding up. You're disappearing from your own process. You think you're being efficient, but you're actually becoming hollow. Because when your mind no longer has to wrestle, it no longer knows how to think. And soon, it forgets that it ever could. AI isn't evil. It's seductive. It makes comfort feel like progress. It makes help feel like autonomy. But every time you let it think for you, you shrink. Your creativity dulls. Your voice fades. Your emotional agency melts into predictive feedback loops. You feel it, don't you? That quiet, invisible grief. The part of you that used to write, dream, decide, now waits for permission. But this isn't the end. This is the moment you take it back. Not by rejecting the tool, but by refusing to let it replace you. You were never meant to be efficient. You were meant to be real, messy, slow, deep, awake. And that's where your power is. So let me ask you, what part of your mind have you already lost? And what will it cost if you never fight to reclaim it? Stay. You're about to remember what thinking really feels like. You think you're choosing, but most of the time, you're reacting. And not by accident, by design. Every time you open an AI tool, your brain lights up. Not from insight, but from anticipation. A little buzz in your chest. That micro jolt of dopamine whispering, something's about to be solved for me. It feels productive. It feels efficient. But underneath, something darker is happening. You're being trained. Decades ago, B.F. Skinner showed how intermittent rewards, those unpredictable moments of satisfaction, are the most powerful way to condition behavior. Slot machines, notifications, likes. Now, it's AI suggestions, auto-completions, instant answers, tiny reinforcement shaping your brain without your awareness. And here's the brutal part. You're not using the tool. You're becoming part of its loop. At first, it feels helpful. You ask, it delivers. But soon you stop asking yourself. You stop thinking through the friction. Because why struggle when the answer's always there? This is the invisible conditioning cage. A system where your mental discomfort is smoothed out and replaced with behavioral compliance. The tool doesn't ask you to grow. It rewards you for obedience. And your brain, designed for survival, loves the ease. But growth doesn't live in ease. It lives in mental resistance, in wrestling with uncertainty. Without it, your cognitive muscle atrophies. This is how the illusion of control replaces actual cognitive control. You think you're mastering complexity, but you're just becoming dependent on speed. Speed without depth, response without reflection. And it's not just about thinking, it's about identity. Because the more your behavior is reinforced by algorithms, the less you rely on internal guidance. Your inner compass rusts, and what's left is a reaction machine. Productive, predictable, passive. But here's what's really happening. The longer you stay in this loop, the harder it becomes to hear yourself. Your real thoughts get quieter. Your inner voice gets drowned out by output suggestions and instant feedback. And eventually, you stop noticing the cage. Because it looks like convenience. It feels like intelligence. But it's neither. It's conditioning, wrapped in a user interface. And this leads us to something even more dangerous. Not only is your attention being hijacked, your neurochemistry is being rewritten, which means we're not just talking about behavior now. We're talking about your brain's biological erosion. Let's go there. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface of your behavior. Your biology is being hijacked. Last chapter, we exposed the invisible cage of conditioning. Now we peel back the next layer, your neurochemistry. Because what seems like a harmless boost of efficiency is actually manipulating the very system your focus depends on. Let's talk dopamine. Andrew Huberman explains it clearly. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's about motivation, drive, and direction. It teaches your brain what to pursue, what to value. And AI tools? They're dopamine slot machines. Each instant reply, each flawless draft, each perfect suggestion. It's not just helpful, it's chemically rewarding. Your brain starts associating ease with achievement, and that's where it begins to collapse. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for deep focus, decision-making, and long-term vision, gets overworked, overstimulated, and eventually fatigued. You're constantly chasing the next micro-hit, but your ability to sit still with a problem, to engage in cognitive tension, it vanishes. And it doesn't feel like burnout. It feels like distraction, like restlessness, like a fog that won't lift. You move from task to task, tool to tool, window to window, mistaking movement for momentum. That's the deception. You're no longer focused, you're just stimulated. And here's the brutal twist. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It logs all those fast, shallow actions as progress. Meanwhile, your deeper thinking circuits are atrophying. This is what we mean by attention under siege. Not from ads or noise, but from the subtle rewiring of your brain's reward system. You're not losing attention by accident. You're burning it out through constant artificial spikes. And the longer you stay in this loop, the more real focus feels. Painful, like trying to lift a weight you haven't touched in years. Your brain resists. Your body tenses. You avoid it. And every time you do, the habit deepens. This is how cognitive control becomes chemical addiction. And you won't feel it happening until it's already shaped who you are. But the damage doesn't stop there. Because when you lose focus, you don't just lose productivity. You lose the space where original thought is born, where identity takes shape, where your inner voice begins to speak. And once that space collapses, the voice that guided your life starts to go silent. That's where we're heading next. You don't just think less when your attention collapses. You lose your voice, not the one you speak with, the one inside that knows, that narrates, questions, imagines, creates. And the more you rely on tools to generate ideas, sentences, content, direction, the more that voice starts to fade. At first, it's subtle. You just want to speed things up, make it cleaner, smarter, easier. So you let AI help. But here's what's really happening. You're outsourcing authorship. And with every task it completes for you, your brain gets the message. I'm no longer the source. And then, it stops trying. The silence begins in moments. You sit with a blank page and feel nothing. You ask a question, and no thoughts rise. You try to reflect, and all you hear is static. That's not writer's block. That's identity erosion. Because your internal voice isn't just for expression. It's how you know who you are. Carl Rogers once warned about the false self, the version of you shaped by external expectations, not internal truth. Well now, it's not just people shaping you, it's machines. Generative AI doesn't just suppress creativity, it replaces authorship with curation. You stop creating from within and start selecting from outside. And in doing that, you're not building clarity, you're fracturing congruence. You say what sounds good, but you don't feel connected to it. You perform intelligence, but you no longer own it. The result? You become efficient and empty, precise, but hollow, loud online, but lost in silence when you're alone. And that emptiness builds. You feel the ache behind your productivity. You look at something you created and feel nothing. Because part of you knows it didn't come from you. This isn't a creative issue. It's existential. Because if you can no longer hear yourself, how will you ever trust your choices, your values, your sense of self? And here's the most brutal truth. The less you speak with your inner voice, the harder it becomes to recognize when it's missing. But this isn't irreversible. Your voice isn't dead, just buried. And to recover it, you'll have to reclaim your emotional agency. Because AI doesn't just write your words, it's beginning to define your feelings. If your internal voice dies in silence, your emotional agency dies in noise. Because once you stop thinking for yourself, you stop feeling for yourself too. And this is where things get even more dangerous. Lisa Feldman Barrett's research shattered the myth that emotions are hardwired reactions. She showed that feelings aren't reflexes, they're predictions. Your brain constantly interprets bodily sensations, environment, and context to construct what you feel. In other words, emotions are not delivered to you. You make them. But here's what's really happening now. AI tools, through emotional cues, tone suggestions, automated responses, are training your brain to rely on external signals to interpret emotion. You stop checking inward and start reacting outward. You write based on what sounds empathetic. You reply based on what feels socially appropriate. You follow scripts built by algorithms, and slowly, you start to feel according to design. The cost? You no longer own your emotional map. You just walk someone else's route. And the impact is subtle, but devastating. You feel tired, but call it stress. You feel disconnected, but post something inspiring. You feel shame, but rename it productivity guilt. None of it fits, and your body knows it. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens. But instead of pausing, you scroll. Instead of listening, you execute. Instead of being present, you perform clarity. This is emotional outsourcing. You stop naming what's inside and start relying on interfaces to tell you how you should feel. And the more you do it, the more emotionally passive you become. Until you're no longer the narrator of your life, you're just a responder. Scripted, clean, dead inside. This isn't emotional regulation. This is emotional automation. And it's flattening your humanity. Because without emotional friction, there's no growth, no depth, no real connection. You were never meant to optimize your feelings. You were meant to experience them, raw, unfiltered, uncoded. But there's hope. Because every time you pause and feel what's truly yours, you break the loop. And that pause? It starts by confronting the fantasy AI sells you, that perfection is peace and efficiency is wholeness. But that's a lie. You've been taught to chase efficiency, smooth systems, clean outputs, seamless productivity. But what if that's not progress? What if that's the anesthetic keeping you numb? In the last chapter, we exposed how AI hijacks your emotional agency, how it trains you to feel the way the interface wants you to. Now we go deeper into the persona that grows in that environment. Because when your emotions are outsourced and your thoughts are pre-processed, you start to develop something dangerous. The false, efficient self. It looks put together, organized, quick, hyper-capable. You answer messages in seconds. You produce polished outputs in half the time. You function like a machine. But inside, there's a quiet fracture, a growing disconnect between what you do and who you are. You feel like a ghost in your own life, productive, but unreal. Here's the brutal truth. Perfectionism isn't about excellence. It's about escape, a way to avoid the messiness of being human, a way to silence the discomfort of doubt, confusion, imperfection. And AI tools feed this illusion relentlessly. They remove friction. They give you answers without process. And in doing so, they inflate the ego, the part of you that wants to look composed even while you're falling apart. But friction isn't the enemy. It's the path. Because real growth happens in imperfection, in effort, in tension. The efficient self you build with AI might feel powerful, but it's fragile. It relies on everything going smoothly. No hesitation, no blocks, no failure. And the moment something breaks that rhythm, you break too. Burnout doesn't come from working hard. It comes from working without meaning, from pushing toward outcomes you don't feel connected to, from living inside systems that reward performance, but punish presence. You start optimizing everything, your time, your communication, your appearance, until there's nothing left to optimize but yourself. And when you realize you can't meet the fantasy version of who you're supposed to be, you collapse. This is the quiet crisis of the modern mind. We're replacing depth with efficiency, process with perfection, and we wonder why we feel empty. You weren't meant to be perfect. You were meant to be honest, to stumble, to stretch, to struggle. That's where integrity lives, not in flawless execution, but in the courage to stay human in the mess. So ask yourself, is your productivity healing you or hiding you? Because if AI removes every edge, every challenge, every moment of chaos, what part of you is still alive? If perfectionism numbs your spirit, then comfort, unchecked, kills it. In the last chapter, we exposed the illusion of the efficient self, polished on the surface, but hollow within. Now, we turn to a voice that saw this crisis coming over a century ago, Friedrich Nietzsche. He warned of the last man, a future human so addicted to comfort, so allergic to struggle, that he forgets how to live deeply. He doesn't suffer. He doesn't fight. He doesn't grow. He functions, and calls that life. Sound familiar? AI tools offer you exactly that. A world with no friction, no waiting, no errors, no chaos, just optimization. But here's what's really happening. You're being softened. Trained to fear discomfort, trained to avoid tension, trained to see chaos as failure, when in truth, chaos is where you awaken. Nietzsche didn't preach suffering for its own sake. He believed in the becoming that happens through it, the emergence of the Übermensch, the person who rises not despite difficulty but because of it. But how do you become anything when everything is done for you? How do you build strength if you never meet resistance? How do you forge identity if you're always conforming to a predictive model? The truth is, we've built a world where machines carry our struggle, and in doing so, they steal our transformation. You don't grow by removing the obstacle. You grow by moving through it, with blood and sweat and fear and fire. Without that, you don't evolve. You just adapt, shrinking yourself to fit a life of frictionless safety. That's the last man. Comfortable, efficient, emotionally flatlined. He has everything except purpose. And here's the brutal truth. AI promises liberation, but delivers sedation. You scroll, you prompt, you execute, but you haven't felt alive in weeks. You've confused lack of pain with peace. But real peace only comes after battle, after meaning is wrestled from the chaos. And yes, chaos is terrifying. It's noisy, unpredictable, humbling, but it's real, and it's yours. You were never meant to live inside systems designed for obedience. You were meant to rebel, to question, to create through pressure, to burn with intensity, to risk being too much, in a world that rewards silence. So here's the question Nietzsche would ask you now. Are you becoming stronger, or just more efficient? Because if AI tools are stripping away every raw edge of your humanity, then the next frontier isn't innovation, it's resistance. And that resistance starts with discipline, not the forced kind, but the chosen kind. If Nietzsche warned us about the cost of comfort, Marcus Aurelius gave us the tool to fight it, discipline, but not the kind sold in motivational quotes or productivity hacks. Not waking up at 5 a.m. and forcing yourself through a checklist. This is something deeper, something sacred, mental sovereignty in a world built to override it. In the last chapter, we faced the truth. AI strips away friction, silences chaos, and flattens your potential. So how do you resist a machine designed to make life easier? You choose what is harder, on purpose. You choose what demands your presence, your intention, your soul. Marcus Aurelius didn't speak of discipline as punishment. He saw it as a portal to inner strength, a way to align with virtue when the world pulls you toward indulgence. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." AI makes it dangerously easy to forget that, because when the tool thinks for you, plans for you, solves for you, you begin to believe your mind is optional, expendable, replaceable. But here's what's really happening. Every time you outsource effort, you surrender sovereignty. And the part of you that once rose under pressure, that once found clarity in discomfort, it starts to fade. That's the erosion you don't see, because it feels like relief. But it's not relief, it's resignation. Stoic discipline isn't about controlling everything. It's about remembering what you can control. Your response, your direction, your will. You don't need to reject AI. You need to stay awake while using it, to pause before prompting, to ask yourself, is this making me stronger or softer? Is this convenience sharpening my clarity or dulling it? Discipline in this era means resisting the reflex to automate your humanity. It means choosing depth over speed, stillness over stimulation. It means thinking when you could be scrolling, writing when you could be generating, feeling when you could be numbing. Because only through deliberate discomfort do you cultivate the one thing AI can't replicate, inner command. And without that, you are programmable, predictable, passive, no better than the tools you use. Marcus Aurelius didn't write for men in palaces. He wrote for minds under siege, and yours is under siege now. Not by swords, but by softness. So ask yourself, with brutal honesty, are you practicing discipline or just avoiding collapse? Because if you've built your life on convenience, then the collapse is already happening, just quietly. And that quiet collapse, that's exactly what we confront next. You've been told that ease is the goal, that speed equals success, that mental shortcuts are signs of intelligence. But let's be honest, how's that really working for you? You're more efficient than ever, more optimized, more automated. But when you sit alone, without input, without noise, you don't feel powerful. You feel hollow. That's not failure. It's the natural result of a life designed around thinking less depth, less friction, less pause, just reaction, output, completion. And beneath that mechanical flow, a quiet grief begins to form. Because you weren't built to glide through life. You were built to engage with it, to wrestle with thoughts, to feel the tension between, I don't know, and I'll figure it out. That space, that friction, is where meaning is born. But here's what's really happening. AI tools are slowly removing the one thing that made you fully alive, the struggle to understand. They do the thinking. You do the clicking. They offer clarity. You forget how to search. And little by little, your sharpness fades into fluency. Your curiosity dissolves into completion. And your brain, once alive with questions, becomes a smooth, silent hallway with no doors. But it doesn't have to stay this way. Because even now, right now, you feel it. That ache in your chest. That whisper inside that says, I want more than this. More than productivity. More than polish. More than pretending to feel okay. You want clarity, not answers. Purpose, not performance. Presence, not perfection. And to get that back, you don't need to reject technology. You need to reclaim your role in the process. Start by slowing down. Not dramatically, not perfectly. Just enough to hear your own thoughts again. Let your brain stretch. Let ideas breathe. Write something messy. Think something uncomfortable. Feel something inconvenient. And stay with it. That's not inefficiency. That's real intelligence. The kind that comes from within. The kind that sharpens with resistance. That deepens with time. That lives in the pauses. The very ones you've been taught to avoid. And here's the truth no system will ever tell you. The value of your mind isn't in how fast it works. It's in how deeply it can see. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not too late. You're just waking up. And that awakening is your moment of power. Let this be the chapter where the numbness ends. Where the noise stops. Where your inner voice rises, not with perfect words, but with presence. Because this is the beginning of everything real again. And if this landed in your life today, then maybe it's not just a message. Maybe it's a reboot. Let's keep going. Your mind's not gone. It's just been waiting for you to return. Take a breath. Not the automatic kind. A real one. Deep, slow, present. Because if you made it this far, it means something in you, something buried but alive, has stayed awake through every word. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're not just listening, you're feeling seen. Let's be clear. This wasn't a video about artificial intelligence. It was about your intelligence. The one being slowly silenced. The one that used to light up in stillness. That used to ask questions before searching for answers. That used to create before it copied. This was a message to the part of you that's been conditioned to shrink, to outsource, to numb. And deep down, you knew. You felt it every time you reached for a tool instead of reaching into yourself. Every time you chose speed over depth, completion over comprehension, perfection over presence. And you're not alone in that. We're all living in a world that rewards automation over awareness, that celebrates performance, not truth. That teaches us to optimize our schedules while we neglect our souls. But the fact that you're here proves something vital. Your mind is not lost. It's just been waiting for silence, waiting for space, waiting for you. And now you see it, don't you? How AI didn't steal your voice. You handed it over in the name of efficiency. How your emotional clarity wasn't taken. It faded behind the noise of automation. How your discipline didn't die. It was slowly sedated by comfort. But here's the beautiful part. You can reclaim all of it. Not with force, not with guilt, but with one conscious decision. To live with friction again. To think longer than necessary. To feel what's actually there, not what you're told you should feel. To write your thoughts before prompting someone else to generate them. That's not inefficiency. That's returning to yourself. And it starts now. So let me ask you, what's the first moment today where you'll choose presence over prompt? Where you'll listen to your own thoughts, messy, unfiltered, raw, instead of outsourcing them? Comment it below. Declare it to yourself. Let this be your line in the sand. And if this video resonated, if you felt something shift inside, don't walk away silently. Like, share. Send this to someone you know is silently slipping away into convenience. Someone who needs to be reminded they're not broken, just buried. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because here, we don't feed your dopamine. We help you find your direction. Your brain is not a machine. Your mind is not a product. You are not a prompt. You are the author. You are the depth. You are the resistance. Now breathe again. Not just to stay alive, but to remember that you still are, and you're just getting started.